has our Twitter selected affixes, where Twitter was quite mean to our MDI competitors.
You guys
And
can stop
Waycrest
being
Manor
mean
after
because
that.
it's much more fun to watch an easy FX game because then they can do bigger pulls. You gotta be easier on the teams, guys.
Gotta be nice, alright? We gotta see those big pulls. And what better dungeon to start off some of those big pulls between Atal'Dazar right now, where we've got Fortified, Sanguine, and Grievous. Let's get it going. Self-Reliance versus Pain for Femme.
Oh, so this first pull for both teams is actually insanely large. Some of the times it doesn't actually matter if the Blonde Zombie's mantle goes off. They just need to make sure that they're cleaving down that Colossus at an even rate, where it looks like Pain for Femme ended up pulling that Colossus on the side of Self-Reliance.
Yeah.
They elect to pull just a little bit smaller, so their pull should be going a little bit quicker. Pain for Femme is... looks like they healed the Colossus a little bit. That guy looks very healthy.
That is actually a very spicy pull that we see here from Pain for Femme, as they also pop their Bloodlust to do this kind of pull. Now, the Colossus is a mob that you usually don't really pull.
Yes.
What it does is when you kill any troll around it, then it will get buffed, and that's why it was so big. It's almost like a bowstring effect, basically, and that's why it was so huge at the very end, though. They did manage to pull it off. 27% trash in one pull, so already 10%, 11% ahead to Self-Reliance here. Self-Reliance, completely different route, as they actually are doing a skip here and moving on to the Priestess room.
So there's like a major discrepancy here with Pain for Femme. They're using this Voidweaver Mouthier as like a little bit of downtime to be able to get their Death Knight's cooldowns back available, where Self-Reliance did a little bit smaller pull in the beginning. Maybe we're able to save some of their offensive CDs, and they pull straight into Priestess Alunza with all of this trash, using their Bloodlust right there, where Pain for Femme used their Bloodlust on the first pull of the dungeon.
Yeah, this is also a pretty spicy pull by Self-Reliance here, as they pull the whole room with the boss. Now, there's so many things going on at the same time. You see Furo actually going down, as he had the cast from the Priestess on him, and Anda going down on top of it as well. They did get the Battle Rest off on Furo at least, but now they're out of Battle Rests, so if they can't get Anda back up anymore, they have to 3-man the boss. Now, thankfully, the trash is almost down here, and Priestess is not actually as super difficult, but as Furo goes down again.
He got hit by the Juggernaut charge whenever the Juggernaut was actually just at 0% health, too. Oh, that's going to be so tragic. Yeah, they're going to have to reset the boss here.
Reset him.
Oh, that was almost beautiful by Self-Reliance, whereas on the side of Pain for Femme, it's like we were saying, they were just playing a little bit safer of a strategy with how the Colossus ended up working out. So it's going to be just a little bit easier for them to down Priestess Alunza. They don't need their Bloodlust there, and they're just going to be able to deal with all of this pretty easily. Whew.
Man, yeah, that was a really big risk to pull all of this, because usually when we see a big pull here in this room, they don't pull the Juggernaut and the Augur all the way in the left side here where Harudra is standing right now. They leave those two mobs out because it's so much a control that you need on the caster and the Augur to interrupt, and then you have the extra charge from that Juggernaut, and that's why I usually don't pull it on top, but they risked it and it just didn't work out. Furo going down twice. He's the one baiting the charge, right, because it goes on a ranged target if everyone else is in melee range, and he just did not manage to dodge the charges properly, getting all that damage in. Now, Pain for Femme on the other side did the different risky, like the less risky pull as you mentioned, and they're moving on to the next trash pack now.
Yeah, so we've seen actually a lot of different techniques used right here. So a lot of the times teams will end up just like fearing these mobs or maybe leaving them behind. It just kind of depends on what they're doing. And then like a rogue sometimes will go down and like tricks the tank and then snap the tank down to Razan. But we don't see any rogues available for either team, so no team utilizing that little bit of technique. Instead, they're pulling all of the trash on top of that snap pillar. The Demon Hunter calls out that he's going to be fell barraging everything. All the Sards die evenly, and then the tank immediately gets out of the snap spot. Femme there doing a great job at kiting out the Sanguine to not heal any of the mobs. This is a good pull by Pain for Femme.
Oh yeah, this is a huge pull as well. And one thing to note, in case you guys don't know what snapping is, basically the tank goes to a position that is unreachable for the mobs.
Yes.
And if the mobs can't reach their aggro target, they will teleport to them. And that's what they are doing here. They go to a spot where they can't get reached, pull the mobs, and they all teleport to the tank. The one thing that is actually very difficult to handle here in Atal'Dazar is Sanguine when you do the snapping pulls, because the swords have a lot less HP than the Sky Screamers and the other mobs. So if you don't walk out of the snapping spot in the correct time, then they will heal up a ton from the Sanguine pulls that the swords drop.
Yeah, but an advantage that these teams do have is that all 4 of their members, aside from like all 5 of their members, actually have a taunt. So if there's just only one Sky Screamer, then one of the DPS or the healer could taunt the Sky Screamer out of the spot, just to be able to make it a little bit easier to make sure all the mobs don't get Sanguine healed. Self-Reliance is actually doing a very similar pull to what Paint for Fem ended up doing, but because of the issues that they had at the very beginning, they were just a little bit behind. They actually jumped down there as soon as all of their mobs died to get them unsnapped, as opposed to trying to traverse back onto the platform. So this would have, I think it would have been a little bit quicker of a strategy, but Paint for Fem is still significantly in the lead.
Yeah, I really like the strategy here from Self-Reliance, but I think their timing is off. I believe that the boss would have been here if they didn't wipe on Priestess, right? So they probably had the strategy that to jump down, the boss is going to be there, and they just nuke the boss with the trash. Didn't really work out now because of the different timings they have, but the boss fortunately did patrol around anyway, so now they can pull the boss. Gotta be a little bit careful with the Sanguine pulls here, because you do not want to heal the boss up. That's going to be a big time loss.
I wonder... The fear was also kind of scary there. I think they ended up using Revival to be able to dispel off all the fear on all of their players. Furrow went off to the side just so he was line of sight, because for those who don't really do a ton of Atal'Dazar, those pillars on that side right there are actually fake and don't provide cover for that fear. Razan is dropping incredibly low for Self-Reliance, where Paint for Fem is about to kill it right now. Has Self-Reliance caught up? I mean, like, obviously they're, like, really far behind because they ended up resetting the boss, but they definitely caught up.
They have a lot of trash percentage, right? Like 20% almost. It's pretty big on a Fortified setting here. So it's still quite a lot of time they need to make up, on top of also having the 15 seconds difference here. I think Paint for Fem needs to make some sort of mistake, or needs to play really safe for Self-Reliance to catch up here. But there's so many things that can happen in these dungeons, as we've seen in the junkyard earlier, for example. Now, they do another snapping pull here, a pretty big snapping pull, as Fem drops super low. Now, when you're snapping these turrets, the tank gets so much melee hits from those swords because they're not jumping around. And that's why Fem is struggling so much to survive here.
Yeah, and their melees, I think, are also magic damage, which Protection Warrior does not exactly hit... like, known for being the best at being able to mitigate. That was an incredibly good pull by Fem to be able to just pull that off. Very scary, I must say.
Yeah, that looked super, super scary. One more thing about Grievous. Prot Warriors don't actually manage to deal with Grievous as well as some of the other tanks, because they don't have as much self-healing. So they can mitigate a lot of damage, but they can't heal themselves up. So sometimes they end up having a 4-stack of Grievous for a really, really long time. And it's just so much extra damage on the tank. So definitely something you gotta watch out for with this Grievous affix in this dungeon.
Self-Reliance is taking the Season 1 route, going around this side, like towards all the undead, to where Volkal is. This is, oh my goodness, this is a very scary
a big pull, yeah.
Huh? Oh, and here comes the Shield Bearers of Zul as well. They cast that Bulwark of Juju, which decreases your damage done. If something like your Demon Hunter gets like his full Iris or Spell Barrage caught by that Bulwark of Juju, they just lose all of their damage. So they have to make sure that they are dealing with that correctly. They're utilizing Ring of Peace here. Harudra ends up going down, though.
Big problem for them here as Fur goes down as well. It looks like a whole team wipe. If this trash pack resets, it's going to be a huge loss for them.
It's not reset
thankfully, yet. Ashvel is still in combat here on his Demon Hunter. He is kiting them, so thankfully they are going to recover here and manage to pull this off. But such a big time loss anyway, as they have 8 deaths now in total. One of their DKs going down as well. Yeah, this was a really risky pull, and it looks like they were just barely not managed to pull it off there, as Harudra died when all the mobs were really low percentage.
I don't even know if that would have been worth doing, like, because it puts them in such a bad position on the map. They have to go Volkal right after.
Well, I assume they would have used a pillar here to get over to Volkal.
I mean, maybe, because the Fear guy is in that pillar, right? So the Fear guy would be in that pillar, which is a little bit rough to deal with on Yasma, so that kind of makes sense. Alright, so they're cutting the trash all the way back to the beginning. They're going to corpse camp these couple of mobs, whereas on the side of Paint for Fem, they're dealing with Volkal quite nicely.
Yeah, big struggle here for Self-Reliance, unfortunately. Paint for Fem, on the other hand, 0 deaths, very clean run by them. Now, Paint for Fem... they're veterans for sure. They have been participating in the MDI for a long time already, and to be honest, Paint for Fem used to be a team that they messed up quite a lot. Like, they were choking once in a while, having some deaths here, having maybe doing like too big of a pull and then just not pulling it off. But in this dungeon here, very, very clean. And they also had some really nice strats. I mean, the pulls that they were doing, and the snapping pulls, and also this Colossus pull, which was a very interesting one.
I agree.
It seems to be working out for them.
Absolutely. They looked very practiced on this dungeon. Even though that they were not banning the first map of this series, they weren't banning that Motherlode, they still looked like they were ready to go into Atal'Dazar first. I mean, ultimately, World of Warcraft is like pretty momentum-based. If you're kind of on tilt, then you're going to just like play strictly worse. So Self-Reliance needs to definitely be able to kind of like brush off that tilt, whereas Paint for Fem needs to carry their momentum forward. They're actually done with all of their trash, and they're going to be making their way to Yasma. This is going to be scary for Paint for Fem, but this is the last crux of the whole entire instance. They no longer need to really worry just about anything. They need to make sure that they do, in fact, get Yasma down cleanly. They're actually playing this middle obelisk. So inside of this obelisk, Urgroth, Breaker of Heroes, the Spirit Buster guy lies. So they really don't want to pull that with Yasma, I guess.
I wonder if they are pulling it because they know they're pretty far ahead, or if this was their plan all along.
So,
because, I mean, dealing with this tank mastery in the last boss is very, very difficult, but you can probably pull it off with Lalas having double DK burst. You have the Demon Hunter, you can taunt one of the Spirit Breakers, and you can meta the other one, right?
Sure.
So theoretically you could pull it off, but it is very dangerous.
I mean, I guess technically they could know. Something for the viewers at home, like the players do have access to be able to watch like the YouTube feed just of these matches, but it is on a 1.5-minute delay. So it would be kind of rough. Self-Reliance is really far behind, so Paint for Fem would be able to gauge like risk versus reward via a 1.5 minutes, but it just kind of depends, I guess, right?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, this last boss here, Yasma, is definitely very difficult to deal with if you have the tank breaker, because not only do you have the tank ability you need to deal with, but you also have this huge area of denial that theoretically you can tank it. If you have a huge defensive, you can just stand in it and take the damage and out heal it. But there's just so many other things going on as well, right? You have to walk out because of the boss cast, you need to interrupt the boss, you need to interrupt the spider, and there's just so many things going on that maybe it's too difficult to deal with the tank buster as well.
Yeah, so they're playing 3 obelisks with Yasma here. Blood of the Corruptor is actually pretty easy over. Actually, no, they're only playing 2 because they played Voidweaver Malthier at the very beginning. So they're playing a little bit safer of a strategy than what we've seen in other dungeons. I actually hate Voidweaver Malthier with Yasma.
Yeah, I agree, because the boss already needs to be interrupted
once
anyway, right? So you need to one interrupt for the boss, and then if you on top of that also have to interrupt Void Reaver while walking away, having spiders everywhere, having pools. It's just very difficult.
She
and
also
if you have
gets
one of
caught
those
out in the middle
bursts,
of the room, and it's like impossible
yeah, she
to
doesn't
move her.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think we're in agreement on that.
Either way, they're in 0 death still, so a very good job by Paint for Fem. I mean, I'm really impressed by their performance here on Natal. They, I mean, they got time trials place 6, so they didn't do that well compared to some of their other time trial performances in the past, but definitely showing up here in this Natal. It seems like they are very, very practiced, and also seems like they know the meta very well, of course, as they're playing double DK and the Demon Hunter as well on Sebek. Sebek used to be a only Rogue player, but let's be honest here, Rogue was so good that he didn't need to play anything else. But he seems to be doing very well on this Demon Hunter here as well.
Yes, Demon Hunter. Notoriously the most complex class in World of Warcraft. You press Blade Dance, you do damage. You press I-Beam. I actually think it just is a true testament to how veteran this Paint for Fem team actually is. They have a lot of people who have participated in many MDIs, and so it just comes down to experience, whereas Self-Reliance is, even though they were the 3rd seed, they're a little bit more green in terms of just their experience, and maybe it's coming to show, maybe they just had like a little bit of problems where they just like choked a little bit. We're going to end up seeing, I think ultimately though, Self-Reliance did have some moments of brilliance. They showed off that they have really good pathing, and they were definitely doing stuff that we didn't expect by going in that undead side. But Paint for Fem was just the more clean team here today, and is going to be downing Yasma here in a couple seconds.
Yeah, so it's going to be 1-0 for Paint for Fem here, but there's still 2 games for Self-Reliance to maybe do a reverse sweep. We'll see.
my experience. You know, you have one thing go wrong and it makes it so you kind of lose a little bit of morale, and things start to spiral from there, and your cooldowns get offset, and so you're doing the dungeon in a slightly different order than you are used to. That's a story as old as time itself.
I mean, the cooldowns getting offset, like you're stating there, is absolutely just so hard to be able to fix, especially whenever you're running something like that Demon Hunter. That is so, like the Demon Hunter and the Death Knight, which are so critically important to make sure that they have their cooldowns being used at like very specific times. So because the Demon Hunters are running that Fel Barrage talent. So.
Yeah, and the Mareth's Fang
exactly.
Also a kind of there's a burst window around that. Absolutely.
Spot on.
The amount of damage that we've seen out of these guys, and I mean, running strength trinkets so that they're going to be able to min-max their damage of all the things.
I don't know, man. It's a strong trinket. It says it.
It
right
is.
It's a strength.
It
yeah.
absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yep. But it also goes to show in this Sanguine environment as well, Nagura, how much pressure there is on those tanks just to make sure their positioning is on point, especially when they're snapping.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, Sanguine is just an affix that you don't really necessarily see how much time people are losing if they don't play it properly. But even if you only get one tick off on a bunch of mobs, it's still a lot of time that you lose. So playing Sanguine properly and not getting any heals out, or as little heals as possible, is very crucial, and it will save you so much time.
That's right, and we've seen a number of times where just one heal goes off or one missed snap, and even some of those early pulls as well, Tettles, there's just a lot of extra heals that were going off.
I mean, the Priestess Alunza trash is just like a good example of that. They pull so much trash on top of that boss that if that boss actually ends up getting healed to full, then you're sitting on that boss for 20, 30, 40 more seconds than you would otherwise be doing, which is pretty bad. Or on side of Paint for Fem, that Colossus got healed while he also has like stacks of his buff, and then the tank Fem is just running away. Like, ultimately, they were able to recover from that, but that is still a scary moment where you're kind of panicking a little bit.
Yeah, let's dive into a couple of those clips a little bit more here, Dretnos.
Yeah, so we had the issue with self-reliance on that first boss, with the first wipe of the dungeon, which was, you know, that was when things really went from them looking ahead to them not really ever recovering. They ended up having deaths there, and then they ended up having to reset the boss after a couple more people died, and they'd expended their B-res. That's a really worst of both worlds type outcome, where you have reset the boss and spent B-res. Usually when something bad goes wrong there, you're trying to end up at least salvaging one of those resources, but they ended up having to commit both there, and that really set them up to be behind for the rest of the run. Meanwhile, Paint for Fem was looking pretty great. You know, they did have some Sanguine healing. It wasn't perfect, but Sanguine healing being perfect is not always realistic. You know, sometimes it's just going to happen that things are going to get healed a little bit. And what they did particularly well, I think, were the sword snaps, where they snapped everything onto those ledges, killed the swords off, and then snapped off the ledges when the Sanguine was now on the ledge, and that looked really, really clean from them. You know, Fem was at like 20% health. It was scary. They were pulling exactly as much as they could survive, but they did survive it, and that made it so that they then had a safe last boss fight with just 2 obelisks active, and they were able to sail through there with plenty of extra time.
That quad sword snap with the triple bird is so freakishly hard to do, especially on a protection warrior. The fact that he was able to get the mobs grouped up quickly enough, and then their healer was able to get over to him in enough time to be able to top him up is incredibly impressive.
With Grievous
Exactly.
as well.
Oh, I was going to say, you have to deal with Grievous, but you also have to watch out for any of, like, the corruption effects. So if you have anybody running Twilight Devs or something like that, you just melee something, you just get a beam that just rips aggro right from the tank immediately.
Or what if he gets, like, slowed?
Yeah, or you get slowed. I mean, that's supposed to be, like, the lowest level corruption effect, but a lot of times it can be extremely impactful for these.
Yeah, corruption does not mess around when you're doing an already hard pull and you just like 3 things from beyond spawn in your eye. You're just like, why me? Why is it happening to me
Why
now?
me?
Hello.
Yeah.
Especially because they can't even just dispel it anymore. And even when they're running with Mistweavers, Tiger's Lust will remove the effect, but it won't prevent it from being applied to them again. So even just preemptively applying it to them or something like that won't do anything for these guys. So with the next dungeon up on the way, we've got Workshop here, Nagura. Explosive and Necrotic, Fortified. It's going to be interesting.
It's going to be difficult. I mean, Workshop is definitely a more boss-heavy dungeon. It doesn't have that much trash. It's very similar to Kingstress in that regard. So having Fortified is probably good, so they don't have to deal with those tyrannical boss fights. But Explosive might still be a problem. That's maybe we see Rogues, because Rogues are just so good with dealing explosives. We'll see how to deal with this dungeon, because this is the first time we're going to see it Workshop in MDI. So no one's going to know what strategy the other teams are playing.
I bet we see double Hunter with Dwarf Tank.
I
Sure,
think many hunters are
Necrotic.
supposed to be pretty reliable for dealing with the explosives.
They're good.
Just be
They're good
able
at
to
dealing with
help.
explosives, and they're insanely consistent boss damage. I bet we see double hunters from both comps, and then probably dwarf tanks on both comps because the necrotic can be pretty dangerous, and dwarf racial removes it. So
Yeah, the only reason you wouldn't play a dwarf is if you wanted to play a 5-night elf comp, right? Where you have some shadow meld planned in the dungeon.
I get-
but awakened portals kind of reduce the need to have that, right?
Well, I guess there would be a good point in which you could use that night elf racial. So, like before King Mechagon, there's that 5 or 6 mob pack at the very top of his landing. Most people use like an awakened obelisk to be able to not pull that. If they were running a 5 night elf comp, I would expect them to night elf past it and not play that obelisk that's down at the bottom of that ramp.
And fight it with the last boss
Exactly.
instead. Exactly. Yeah.
And you
Yeah, that's
can
one of
night
the
elf
things
off necrotic as well, as long as you're not in boss combat.
Sure.
Yeah, as long as it's not. But it's also the issue of threat that they have to worry about for
Yeah, then
everybody
your-
else along
Then
the
your
way.
melee dies
you know?
10 seconds later.
It's like
Your pet's rolling a lips for so long, right?
Guys,
Game
we're ready to go.
number 2 is ready to go between Self-Reliance and Pain for Femme, who is up 1. Let's get into it, guys. Let's dive into the workshop.
So you were right. We see double hunter comps on both sides here. Let's look at the dwarf as well. If you were right there
Yes?
too,
Okay.
and looks
So,
like
Fem is dwarf.
Fem is dwarf
Yes.
and Herudra is night elf. So we have 5 night elf comp on self-reliance side and the dwarf comp on Pain for Femme.
So I think we'd interpret a lot about how they're going to actually play out the very last part of the dungeon just by that. I think I was probably going to be correct where Self-Reliance will end up not playing that bottom obelisk and actually just playing it with the boss, whereas Paint for Femme is probably going to play that obelisk if I had to guess. That makes a lot of sense. Both
They also
teams.
have the rogue here on Pain for Femme's side, right? For the shroud.
Oh, that's a good call. Exactly, they can use Shroud to be able to deal with that. So there's very similar utility. I guess it comes down to how much damage DK provides on single target versus Rogue. He's running that Frost specialization. Mikkel is a Frost Death Knight main on live. Also plays Rogue fairly regularly, so he's very good at both of those. Utilizing Frost here, which we haven't seen in a while inside of MDI play.
Yeah, interesting to see the Frost DK come out from Mikkel here. Very interesting. We also see, I mean, the Rogue and the Frost DK's difference in damage. I'm not really sure who's gonna pull off more single target damage in a dungeon like Workshop. We'll see in the end. Right now, it looks like Self-Reliance does have more single target damage as they're about to finish up the boss here. While Pain for Femme is still working on, still has very high HP in it too.
Yeah, on Platinum Pummeler, where Self-Reliance actually just got their boss over on top of No Mercy just a little bit quicker. That was a big time save for them, so being able to deal with that's going to be nice. I think here is where the DK is probably going to come in handy damage-wise and just show why they are, in fact, playing that Frost Death Knight. Beyond maybe just comfort, right?
Yeah, it might be a big thing as well with comfort, because a lot of those dungeons, like, it really just, as long as you have the basic comp, you can switch one DPS with another, as long as you don't need a certain utility, right? Because you do have the monk on the healer. The monk provides a physical damage buff already, so you don't need to worry about that. Sometimes you can think about getting the extra magic damage as well on the demon hunter, but hunters, of course, benefit way more from that physical damage, so they don't have to think about that. And outside of that, DK versus Rogue, probably not such a big difference in damage.
Okay, so let's actually analyze what Self-Reliance just did right there. So Self-Reliance pulled all of the mobs, and then they kited and like they used Turtle, or they just line of sighted every single explosive going off, whereas Paint for Femme dumped a large amount of their hunter's damage. I mean, it's not like a significant amount of the hunter's damage, but they did spend globals to try to kill off all those explosives, whereas on the side of Self-Reliance, they ended up not doing that. That's actually a really good strategy. These waste processing units can be kind of scary here. While Kujo is casting his frontal, they need to make sure that that frontal is really not aimed at the melee, otherwise it's going to die, but they do a good job there as well.
So this looks, the pull that Self-Reliance here was doing looked simpler than it actually was, but as you mentioned, they used their defensive to survive the explosives, and on top also surviving the waste exploding, because they do an explosion on death. And on top of that, they were also utilizing the boss's mechanics. You see this box that drops. That box actually line of sights, and the waste explodes, and you can line of sight the explosion. So they were fighting the boss at the same time as the trash, and line of sighting the explosion with the box that the boss drops. So basically just having 2-in-1 with the line of sight of the box here. Very good utilization of the boss's abilities here.
Yeah, because the box kind of expands whenever he's doing his cast. So you can actually like plant yourself like almost inside of the frame of the box while still being undercover. There's like a nice weak aura for it that you can use to be able to gauge whether or not you're still in range, like you're still able to hit the boss while safe from the venting flames going off. Oh,
And look how close those two teams are now.
Pain for Femme was caught
Both
back
of them,
up.
Yeah, they caught up on single target damage here on the boss, interestingly enough. And both of them exactly 32% trash. So both of them did the same trash pulls. And Pain for Femme caught up somehow. Maybe they had more procs on their hunters.
Maybe it's just 100. Yeah, like it must just be
it
100
could
damage.
be.
Like, look at how much Shelly and Ricky are doing. Like, Mikkel was doing a lot because he was cleaving off of those waste processing units. Frost Death Knight just does a lot of damage to all of the targets, especially whenever they are in cleave range, with just like their Breath of Sindragosa. But those hunters there, Shelly ends up topping over 100k DPS on Kujo.
Shalla
please don't die
almost
to the
going down
fire.
to the fire here. He did manage to survive, barely. So this fire gauntlet is actually, like, sometimes you might just want to risk running through and take the damage anyway, because if you have to stand there and wait for the fire to disappear, it's actually like a big time loss. So we'll see how they move on here. It's so close between the two.
Yeah, so they end up getting rid of that robot as quickly as possible, start proccing the RP to be able to summon all of these guard dogs and the Tinkerers. I think the Tinkerers cast Giga Wallop and the Personnel Squirrel. I believe that is what casts the Giga Wallop and the Self-Personnel Squirrel. Just make sure that you kick the Giga Wallop. Don't stand in the Personnel Squirrel's AoE effect, and you should be in good shape.
You said a lot of words.
Mob cast ability, kick ability. Don't stand in blue circle.
Okay, I can understand that a lot better. So now we see Pain for Femme, of course, engaging those 3 robots a little bit faster than Self-Reliance because they reach this whole area faster. Now, there's one mob you want to focus down here because it does cast an AoE. As you can see, it happened right now.
Yeah.
It is a fortified setting, so it does quite a bit of damage, but it is manageable for those teams, especially for Mistreavers, as you can see them utilizing their Way of Crane as they have got 100k HPS from Mevo here.
Yeah, making sure that you kill the Mark III bot is the most important thing because they do, they all do the arcing zap, but the Mark III casts that AoE. So knocking him down as quickly as possible is important.
So Self-Reliance just slightly behind, as you can see them just now downing the second wave of mobs as they now engage the mini-boss as well. Now this mini-boss, as you can see, it does have an AoE cast where you need to go to the safe spot. Not that difficult for those teams to deal with, of course, and they don't lose any damage from moving, so that's not any concern either with those double BM hunters just doing the same amount of damage, no matter if they move or not. Just like Moonkin in Legion.
Welcome to Hunter. Do you know you can actually stand off to the side, like on the ramp, and you can outrange that the ground effect?
Wait, is it outranging or are you like elevating it?
You can do either one. You can do both.
Oh, okay.
It
That's
depends. So yeah, Pain for Femme here playing the Obelisk, not playing the Gauntlet, so they don't have to get sent back to the start. So both of them are going to be playing this because ultimately, the damage that would be saved by playing this Obelisk with the final boss versus and like doing this Gauntlet normally versus itself is just not large enough to counteract the gamble. That would be... Ooh, okay, so Self-Reliance actually did something interesting there. They snapped Voidweaver Malthair to that box, which made it get there quicker.
Yeah, I was wondering, so as I saw Pain for Femme just slowly dragging the Voidweaver,
yes.
I was wondering if it's gonna be a bigger time save to just run and snap, or if it's better to just like kill it while running. And I guess it's just gonna be approximately the same thing.
Probably.
Unfortunately, Voidweaver does move very slowly because he constantly casts. So, Shelly actually going down here, unfortunately, right on the pull. Maybe he went out too early before the tank?
I don't know what he got hit by that kills him. Machinist Garden, well known, like, you don't end up taking a lot of damage, like, unless...
Time going down.
Oh.
Oh no. Okay, this is going to be a full wipe by Pain for Femme. There's no way they can recover this. Now, one thing that is one disadvantage Pain for Femme actually has is they don't have anyone who can battle res. They can use the engineering battle res,
True.
but that one has a pretty long cast time. So if a tank goes down or some important member goes down and you have to stand still for a while, which is very dangerous in this fight because of the beams coming out and because of the whirls coming out. So having to stand still and cast the battle rest, the engineering rest, caused them to wipe here. I'm not really sure why Shadow went down, but maybe he clicked the portal too early and Fem wasn't out yet and he had aggro. Not really sure what happened there, but full team wipe, huge time loss for Pain for Fem, unfortunately.
Yeah, whereas on the side of Self-Reliance there, they were utilizing Binding Shot, a significant amount to be able to get Harudra just resets on his Necrotic. They are still running that full 5 Night Elf composition, so Harudra's sitting pretty high on Necrotic stacks, running away, trying to get a reset really quick. Okay, now they're going to charge in on top of that plant. They're going to stun it to make it refixate somebody else. And now Self-Reliance is in really good shape. Paint for Fem has geared back up and is doing a very similar pull. See what I did there? Geared back up. There's a gear.
So Self-Reliance.
It's funny.
Please. So Self-Reliance is doing a pretty good job working on Spark Flux here. This boss can be very dangerous because there's so many things going on at the same time. You have the beam going out, you have all those like area of effects that you need to dodge and walk out of, and if you get hit by anything, it actually does quite a bit of damage. Now, it is a fortified setting, so I don't believe you actually do get one-shot by anything that can hit you here, but if something overlaps or you have the ad spawn at the same time and you get hit by a beam, then it can definitely be dangerous. So you want to make sure you dodge everything as well as you can. And they're also in 71% trash as they pulled everything on top of the boss, right? So pretty risky pull, and it did work out for them. So completely turned around for those two teams. Self-Reliance having the clean run this time around, while their Atal didn't look clean at all. And Pain for Fem having the first clean run in Atal, and now they're the ones struggling here.
I must say, they are not out of the woods yet. The hardest part is probably King Mechagon with triple obelisk. But yes, you are absolutely correct. They're definitely in the driver's seat. So something to note is that these two spider tanks, if you kill the one that's marked with skull, it was the one that was at the higher point on the landing, then the RP, I don't know, vehicle that takes you up to the top will spawn a little bit quicker. So they marked that one with skull. We're like, all right, cleave off this target, use all of your Frost Death Knight damage to be able to cleave off of him, spawn that vehicle, and they're just going to save a few seconds of time with that nice strategy.
Ah, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Exactly.
It's like having a leader when like a patrol goes around, and if you root that guy, then they stop moving. If you root something else, they keep on moving. It's like very interesting how some mobs just have some special like connection that if you kill that one or you root that one, then it affects something else. Interesting. Either way, Pain for Fem are now also moving on. And they made up quite a bit of time, it looks like. Like, they killed that boss pretty quickly now after the wipe.
I'm kind of surprised that they were able to make up all the time that they lost after the wipe. That pull that they were doing with Machinist Garden is actually pretty spooky. So being able to deal with that's nice. So Self-Reliance here, utilizing the shield generators. You see Harudra tanking everything inside of them. I'm surprised that they need to pull this much trash on top of this bridge with the shield generators. But they are making sure that they do stand inside of those. I think there's 75% damage reduction per. So effectively, Harudra will not be taking much, if any, damage. So there's the Ring of Peace coming out too. That's good.
Yeah, and it does overlap, so you can stand in 2 of the shields and gain double the bonus, which is really nice.
Exactly.
As we can see, Anda actually utilizing that, standing in both of them. Now, of course, you don't want to tank the mobs inside those shields because they also take the effect, so you want to make sure you tank them outside, as Harudra is doing here and kiting them away. Hunters definitely can make use of these shields a lot. Melee maybe not so much because, of course, the tank needs to cut them out, so they want to be able to melee the bosses, and it looks like they are doing the Awaken mob here.
Whereas on the side of Pain for Fem, they actually just like leapt over that little area and are now inside of the room with... Is Pain for Fem going to win this just based off the strategy of playing more obelisks with King Mechagon?
If they can pull it off. Now, of course, I think in a lot of dungeons, this is going to be the make or break it key, right? Like, if you manage to pull however many obelisk bosses with the last boss, and you pull it off, you're gonna make up so much time. As we can see right here, if they manage to pull those 3 mobs and they do it perfectly without having any sort of problems, they're gonna win, right?
Yeah.
But it's super, super risky, and we'll see how it goes. As Fem drops very low, and you see Necrotic causing so many problems on top of having to deal with all of those sparks going around in the boss.
Is that 44 stacks? goodness. Oh, Fem
He
is...
also has no dwarf racial ready, unfortunately, so Fem is going to be unhealable in a second here. He either needs to kite or something needs to happen, but there's no way Nemo can heal at some point anymore. He's just going to be immune to any sort of incoming healing.
Yeah, whereas on the side of Self-Reliance, they're dealing with Urgroth Breaker of Heroes, the tank buster guy. I wonder why Harudra isn't running dwarf racial now that I'm looking at it, because they are playing this obelisk in...
Sorry, but Fem was so low, he just now got his dwarf racial ready and he used it right before he died. That was so close.
Clutch.
I could just like imagine Fem spamming that button, and as soon as he got ready, he pressed it. It looks like they pulled it off because of this like very clutch dwarf racial coming out in the very last second. Wow, that was so close.
So Gigazap here coming out of King Mechagon on top of Ricky. Now, oh goodness, Corruption slowed. Okay, he gets hit by the ball. Oh, he's gonna live though. That was kind of scary. Whereas on the side of Self-Reliance, they have used their Bloodlust. They are trying to down Blood of the Corruptor, plus I believe it's Sam Beckoner or Chaos that they have to deal with. Whereas on the side of Paint for Femme, they're going to be downing the aerial unit, which will spawn King Mechagon and have to fight another phase of this fight here in a few seconds.
Yeah, so Self-Reliance, they just play. I mean, they have 0 deaths if you look at them, right? So they actually played a really, really clean dungeon. They played their strategy perfectly. But because they didn't take this risk of playing this other obelisk, they are actually behind now. You see Pain for Femme are already proccing phase 2 here of the boss fight, while Self-Reliance is still working on phase 1.
Yeah, I mean, that's the power of the Frost Death Knight on that fight right there on King Mechagon. Just how much damage he's actually going to be able to do to all the obelisks and whatnot. That's where the Frost DK actually comes in handy. So the fact that they didn't play 3 obelisks with King Mechagon is a little bit questionable, but it does take a lot of practice and a lot of time to be able to be comfortable with even a strategy like that.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe they tried it and they just felt like it's too risky. And you saw how close it was for Pain for Femme, right? If the racial wouldn't have came up there at that very second, then they probably would have wiped. They also, especially when the tank dies and you don't have any class that can battle rest. Again, they do have the engineering rest, but it's just it takes so much longer, and you need to be close to the target and so on. So especially on such a hectic fight with the boss and the obelisk and the awakened mobs, you probably are not going to get a rest out on the tank before your team's just has a full wipe.
Yeah, looks like Pain for Femme's going to be down in the Omega Buster, and at which point they will have to down King Mechagon, where they will respect the 1v1 and let Mewo solo him 1v1. Respect the 1v1. Please do not attack. Stop. That's my kill. And that's going to be the win.
There we go. Pain for Femme 2-0. Wow.
Oh, we gotta watch this. We had a little bit of time left on the clock, but I don't think that Self-Reliance is going to be able to burn the boss down another 20 seconds, something along those lines. But Pain for Femme is just going to let that clock wind it down as...
I mean, it's a lot closer than I thought, actually.
You have the Omega Buster? Yeah, I was going to say, the health just started dropping
yeah?
extremely quickly, but
They do
5
so much
seconds
damage.
remaining, and, you know, like Tettle said, there has to be that 1v1.
You gotta respect the 1v1, exactly.
Yeah, it's a lot closer than I thought, actually. Wow.
Right as King Mechagon pops out, they're like at least 5 seconds. Right there for the kill. Just a bit more. Gonna have 8 or 9 seconds left. But Pain for Femme is going to take that victory, and we'll be having that 2-0. It's quite an upset when we're having